welcome back to City Planner Plays, where we are building Manhattan in Clearwater County. Oh, wait, no, that's not right. This is Van Buren, yet it's becoming a little Manhattan, and that is a problem. Today we are going to address that. We've got these buildings that are just massive, springing up seemingly at random, and that is not how density works. So we're going to talk a little bit about why cities get dense, what is needed to get taller buildings like this, and then we're going to fix the problem here so that in the future we can target our density and tell a story with our larger buildings. But before we get to that, I want to go over some things that I've done off camera and on stream. So the first thing, since we're already here, is this trench. What you'll see is that we now have a variety of crossings going over here. Now, I haven't finished this just yet, but on the crossings where we're allowing vehicles, we are going to have this oh boy, that's scary. What you're going to see is that we're going to have this pavement marking across here to denote that cars can cross here. The speeds are also very low, and we're treating this kind of like a Wunarf and allowing a mixture of vehicles and pedestrians. Obviously, the game's not handling this very well. You have cars just careening into people as they cross the bridge, and in fact, it seems like they're almost waiting to run into people. It's wild. But for most of these, they're going to look like this. We're just allowing people to walk and no vehicles. And to demonstrate that that's the case, we're going to have this pedestrian styling going across here. So that's something to look forward to soon. Haven't quite got to that. And that's because I have been over looking at our farming area. So for the longest time, I've neglected the land in between Ashland and Belmont, and I really want that to change. So we're starting to build some of the farms that really fill in the landscape between those communities. So I built an orchard. The idea was that it's you can have a you-pick orchard, so you go in there, you can pick your own apples, and a number of other farms. Now these are not operational yet. What I'm going to do is go through and actually build these out in between episodes so that I can actually get this filled in, and then I'll make them all operational using our service blocks. And with the service blocks, I think it's going to make a huge difference here, making this all look a lot better. I've also gone through and divided this into a number of farms, and the nice thing about that is then we're going to let the farms dictate our roads rather than the roads dictate our farms, which is kind of what I was thinking of before. I've also gone through and applied roadway hierarchy principles to these farms so that we have the farms divided up by larger county roads, and then we're using the skinny little country roads as the roads that the farm would use internally for access to different fields and whatnot. These would be town roads. The maintenance wouldn't be quite as high quality, and just generally they'd be built to lower standards, so it makes a lot more sense, in my opinion, to do that. And that's because that town that would be responsible for fixing and maintaining that road. So it's just definitely a different sort of quality that you'd expect to see on those roads. Okay, and next, what we have is something that we did on stream. So this is a massive apartment complex, which you might look at this and go, wow, this is super out of place. I actually don't think that it is. I think that you might see an apartment developer go, you know, we really need to get a huge apartment complex. This is really inexpensive land. It's not right next to the coast. It's off this highway. It's not connected into the city. And we're going to build a bunch of, 3-story apartment buildings. We just need a big chunk of land in a field. So that's what they've done. They've picked up this land. And this might look familiar because we've basically stolen what we had in Fairchild and pasted it over here 4 times. So what that means is, whoa, we don't want to destroy that. We don't want to do that either. It means that we've got a whole bunch of residential population that we were able to bring over here. And if you look at our population now, we're up to almost 70,000, which seemed pretty unthinkable not that long ago. So that said, we're going to just definitely decimate that today as we make some of our improvements. We did a few more things on stream, and I want to point those out. It's really what inspired this episode today. If you look, we've gone ahead and straightened out our blocks, really, but we're thoughtful about the way that things look, planted trees to green things up, added some parking, and, I have this access to the rear of the building, and then right here, even creating a special place with our blocks. But what I've noticed is you've got these large buildings looming over. There's no real rhyme or reason to the density. It's kind of just happening. You see that here as well. We've got a 3-story building next to what I believe is, a 10-story building. And anything above 5 stories it becomes a significantly more expensive building because you've got to change your building materials at that point, start incorporating steel and things of that nature into the construction. I would expect that unless there is a reason for density, we are not going to see it. We are going to see a bunch of mid-rise density, and truthfully, with the size that this community is ultimately going to be, a whole bunch of single-family homes, which we have really not much of here. We've got a lot of townhomes and things of that nature. So we are going to call a massive, massive, massive mulligan today and get rid of a bunch of our tall buildings and replace them with smaller buildings that fit the scale of this community better. Hopefully, that prevents us from having all of this abandonment. So the first thing I want to do is look at our districts, because we've got a variety of districts here that you can see, and these districts have all of our building themes associated with them. So right here, Capital's our main one, Midtown's our other one. Sandy Shores and Lower Downtown are both these sort of townhome style districts. So I just want to look at these quickly. We'll look at our building themes here. We see that we have brick attached, downtown brick, and historic American. For Capital, our themes are commercial wall-to-wall, downtown brick, historic American, and brick attached. Now, I know, because I'm intimately aware of these themes, that commercial wall-to-wall is lower density. Brick attached and downtown brick have some higher density buildings sprinkled in there. So we're going into our theme manager and we're going to change some things up. And I want to take a look, first of all, at downtown brick. We're going to look at just what is included inside of this. And I'm going to remove anything that's over 5 stories, because all of those buildings we're going to place by ourselves. So I'm just going to go through and get rid of those quickly. Okay, so I've removed, I think, most of the buildings as I go through that have more than 5 stories. So now I'm going to go through and do the exact same thing for our brick attached. And you start to see that we've got some buildings here. These are our residential ones that are just too tall. So I'm not opposed to having this mid-rise condo. We just want to make sure that we are targeting that ourselves. Okay, so that was quite the process, but I've gone through and removed those buildings. Now, there are a few things that I could do in the future to avoid this. First of all, I think that just having a theme with taller buildings would probably make some sense. We might approach that in the future, but right now we're just going to place them manually, which truthfully might be the most appropriate way to deal with it in this build. So now we've got to take out our bulldozer and we're going to get rid of a significant number of buildings. So where this is going to be, I think the most impactful is along here. Anything that's above 5 stories, I'm going to remove. And I know that this is going to be controversial, but I think that this will give those taller buildings more prominence. And when you think about these buildings, why would they get built? It's either because it's a constrained space, there's not a lot of space left. That's not the case here. There is something really special about the place. That is the case here, and the city planning allows it. And I'm not sure that it would happen just yet here. So we're going to lose some population. So I'm not going to stop there. We're going to go through, and every single tall building in Van Buren that is not a state agency is going to be removed. So this is the mulligan to End All Mulligans. I'm afraid to see what this does to our population. Now, interestingly, I just removed these all along the park. And I think this is maybe one of the few instances where you could make a case that this is a special place and you'd see that density. That said, I'm gonna start us off with kind of a fresh palette. Let's just start out completely fresh. Same thing over here. Now this is going to be considerably more difficult. So what we're going to do is turn on our zoning, and that will let me see which buildings have been zoned in and what has exactly been plopped. Because I don't want to inadvertently delete a state agency. So this is a special location. I built this, but I don't think we're doing it. We're gonna get rid of all these. We will throw some buildings in there that make more sense, place them, and try to get something that's a little more reasonable for the area. Okay, And I think you can see it now. There are no more towers. And what you also see is that we've lost approximately 15,000 population and dropping quickly. I'm going to let this run for just a moment and see how things look. Okay, and I think that we're starting to find an equilibrium again. We finally have some, residential zoning demand, not huge, but it's better than nothing, which is what we had for a while. We're still seeing our population go up, but obviously we've lost about 10,000 citizens. That's okay, because our city wasn't developing properly. And what you can see now is, even though we've got some of these blocks that need some work, or like this, which I don't know what that is. That's bad. We'll get rid of that. We'll even clean up some of these where there's clearly something weird happening. We'll get rid of some of these, and then we'll allow some more of this growth to occur. Now, one of the reasons, we have a tall building that snuck through. One of the reasons that I really wanted to do this is it became more and more apparent to me that many of the buildings that I've picked up over the last little while are actually RICO first. That's a problem. Well, I guess it's a problem if we're going to grow all of our buildings. But if we're not going to grow all of our buildings and we're going to be placing some of them, it's an opportunity. And that's what we're going to take it as. So what we're going to do is, first of all, just experiment and see how this looks. You can see it looks really nice. So some of this is going to be repeating patterns and then being willing to make some of our own choices here. But to me, this feels incorrect. So that part didn't work, right? I'll have to figure that exactly out. But to me, this feels a ton better. Now, the problem, it looks like that's a patio set. So, no, that's a garbage. That's not great. Well, still, to me, this is a much more appropriate building to have right here. So I think maybe this is a better example of what we can do if we are just a little bit more patient and thoughtful and we place some of these buildings that mean a lot to the city. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking this modular low-rise set, which is actually the same set that we used in the stream, and we're placing this. Now, there's some oddities here. This is actually doing, if we take a look, whoa! Control H. The weird thing about this is, because it bumps out like that, yeah, we've got to give this some more thought. So interestingly, I think what we're seeing here is that with this particular asset, the corner and the straight are this, like, it's just if they don't line up, you can't place them side by side like this. I don't know how you would get that to work right. I guess if you placed it right here, you just get that weird thing in the middle where you get, I guess you could just try to forgive it. That would be the other option. What I've done though is grabbed the two corners, and even that is not great because now you have dumpsters. So you got to really think about your assets when you're picking them up to make sure that they work for what you're intending. I guess this angled corner we could use if we really wanted to, and then send a path back or something like that to take advantage of that. So it's going to take a lot more thought to build these areas out. But in general, I think that the result is we get a better overall aesthetic, more realistic look to the entire city. This is an apartment building. It's a low-rise apartment building. That, to me, fits pretty well. And the nice thing about this one in particular, the unfortunate thing I'd say is it looks like that's parking back there. Nice thing about it is that it has windows and doesn't have a bunch of dumpsters. So we're going to forgive the parking and kind of ignore it and just say it's a walkout directly out here. We could add some picnic tables or something if we wanted to get into that level of detail. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to fill in a couple of these areas and try to really give this some more thought, bring our population back. And I don't want to do this in every area, but I do want to come and look at the areas where it would have the most impact on the city, plan these out myself. Okay, so now I have kind of a variety of buildings. I'll have one more over here. A variety of buildings that make up our waterfront. And what you'll see is that these are just considerably more reasonable looking in this particular area. Now we're going to need to pay attention to these, spin some around, and really work them in the way that we would want and expect to see them in here. And I want to make sure that now that we are placing these buildings by ourselves, we are really thinking about sight lines, being able to see through the buildings, so that it's not like there's a wall, because that's been the ongoing issue, is that it just feels like there's a wall preventing people from being able to really see and experience the waterfront. And really it's become a private waterfront for only those lucky enough to experience it, or rich enough. Maybe luck's the wrong word. Okay, so now that we have this, we're going to clean things up just a little bit. I'm going to use my surface painter and come through and fix up a couple of spots like this. So it's a shame, actually. A couple of spots we're going to touch up with this, and a few others. If I can't get this to look perfect, we are going to go ahead and pull out our ploppable concrete, which is another option. The other thing is we could just leave it like this and add in some landscaping. And truthfully, I may just prefer that option. Yeah, in this apartment building, you can see that didn't work. What happened because of the parking in the rear? We've got the same problem here, and I think we're just going to eliminate these as a result. We'll find some better buildings. And what I said about targeted intentional density, this is exactly what I mean. Now here we're gonna add one high density, taller building. And the idea would be that this is a special place. There is a reason for this to exist here. So this would be a building that the developer would lobby hard for. It's got close proximity to the park, the schools, a view of the water, access to this path right here and the quay wall. And it's really a special location. So that special location means that there's a rationale to ask for the density here. And maybe the developer actually sees a path to recouping the money that would be associated with all of this density, because that density is not inexpensive or free. You're going to have to, the price per square foot is going to go up significantly, and they're going to need to see a path to making that money back. Now you see, the only unfortunate thing is I think we have a couple of interesting loading issues here. In fact, what that would likely mean is we've got to spin the building around. I think we're going to leave it though. I think we're just going to accept a little bit of imperfection here. We'll leave these openings along the path here. And I think in the rear, if there's anything that we can do to jazz this up with some landscaping, where the buildings don't have a lot of great rear articulation, obviously we'd prefer to have four-sided architecture. This is an example of not having four-sided architecture. What I mean by that is you can see that there was no bother placed on these walls. Now in the game, that's because you'd want to place this up against another building. In reality, that happens wherever an architect doesn't believe that there will be eyes on the building. So whether there's going to be landscaping there, or it's facing something that doesn't matter quite as much, you end up with things like this. So we are going to landscape to hide some of that nonsense. Now I copied this and placed it using Move It because it just is a little bit easier for me to actually get this to be level. With the quay wall there, it's creating lots and lots of issues for me placing these assets. So something to be aware of. Now here, I think we're gonna put a fairly significant line of trees again. I kind of want something lower though, because you see that we have windows above. In fact, let's just see if we can place these. And now here, I don't want anything high at all. So what we're gonna do here is just line the building a little bit. Okay, so I've done a couple of things just to liven this up a little bit. Added some landscaping, and I think that the buildings the height just makes so much more sense. And to me, this tells a story. Why do we have this height here? Because it's the maximum that you could build reasonably at this particular price point. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at a situation where we've got 5-story buildings here. Those are reasonable to build with the value of the land that we have here and the demand that we have. And look at our demand is picked right back up. So I mentioned the height of this building as well, and I could see this also being really kind of a feather in the cap of a developer who has been developing a long time in the community. That happens where they decide they want to build something totally out of the character of the community because it's really their capstone on their career. So that is certainly something that you could see. So as we go through here, you start to see how much more intentional the scale of the entire community seems. And that is what we wanted to accomplish. Now, there are still some things that we're going to need to adjust. When we take a look here, you can see that there are buildings like this one, which appears to be a corner building, and it's in the wrong place. So I'm going to actually just slide this one over and adjust a few things. So there's absolutely no shame in going through here and trying to figure out exactly what is needed in this area. And that's what I was doing there. I just pulled the building over, put it in a more appropriate location, and attempted to make this make more sense. So I'm going to set the height here. So Control H, select that building and find that intersection point right there. And similar to what we did in the stream, I think what this area really needs is a whole lot of going through and manually adjusting the locations of building. That's how we're going to make this feel like a real place. So part of what's going to make this special is actually going through and making these subtle modifications. Part of it is repetition. That's something you'll often see, not this kind of repetition where it's a bookstore, the bookstore around the corner, but that repetition is, you actually see that in real cities where it was more cost effective for a developer to find a building that fit in a specific location and repeat the use of that building. That is a cost saving measure that I would absolutely expect to see. So right here, for instance, where we have similar models of the same building with slightly different uses, totally makes sense to me. So obviously there's a lot of adjusting that needs to be done, and much of this needs to be done on a stream. It's just one of those things where I think after a little while, I've started to realize that I'm not going to get the aesthetic of the community that I'm looking for without really taking command of the city. So that might just be something that you have to do sometimes. And the consequence is when we come over here now, this to me just makes a ton more sense. So the other thing that I really want to focus on from here on out is really looking at the buildings and making sure that they are functional. So I've done that a little bit here. You can see that what we've done is we've added the fronts of the buildings on the street, added an alley behind it, and here we've got these fronting here. There is no alley for these buildings except for this. So that building to me doesn't work in this location. And maybe what we have to just accept here is that we're not going to necessarily have a whole bunch. We're not going to have wall-to-wall use here. We're just going to have an empty spot here for some landscaping. And that's the sort of thing that, again, I think that I need to become more okay with, because it's certainly something that it can lead to issues trying to jam things in. And then you take a look back and you realize that your entire city is actually, it looks fine when you're zoomed out, and you zoom in at all, the illusion completely falls apart. Okay, and with that in mind, the last thing that I want to really look at in a significant way is one of the spots of the city that I think is really broken, and that is near the Capitol complex. We've got all of these buildings that I zoned in, and they just don't work. So we're going to eliminate the zoning for this entire area and try to get a little bit more thoughtful about this. And the main reason that these don't work is if we take a look, all of these buildings are supposed to have alleyways. They do not. As a result, in my opinion, they look pretty crazy. So we're just gonna get rid of these. I'm gonna use my better bulldozer here because I can focus on just buildings and nothing else. See if I can get this to look clean. Yeah, not gonna work exactly as I want, but it'll do okay. Okay, so now that we've gotten rid of everything there, we need to give this a little bit more thought. And I'm gonna go, there are a number of townhomes that I've picked up. So we've got all of these modern townhomes. Let's take a look at the way that these line up. And these are fine. You know, there's a little bit of extra space in there that maybe I don't love. I'd want to scoot these a little bit closer to one another. But it's not terrible. And then you could absolutely work in some other buildings alongside. So this is kind of more of the Ashland treatment again here, just thinking more about these buildings and placing them in a more deliberate way. So along this street here, I'm going to place some of these modern townhomes. And I like that these change colors as we're going through. We're going to also go ahead, and there are a number of other small-scale modern townhomes that I've picked up. Rather than just having big monolithic blocks of these, we are going to have some smaller blocks with an alleyway down the middle, and we can just place these one by one. So looking at these modern townhomes, these actually have a middle and an end. So what I'm doing is just grabbing the right buildings and making one big apartment complex. So now I can repeat these a few times. Okay, and now I'm just adding some parking behind these. So I believe it's Control X to unlock. And we're gonna have a repeating pattern going through here, giving some parking to these different apartments that we have back here. So there we go. And even though I know that this is a lot of repetition and we're seeing some issues with our land values, this is, in my estimation, a lot better of a solution than we had before. So the problem here is the land value. I'm gonna set this to 3 and see if that solves it. Well, and as I finish these up, look at what we have happening. A wonderful fire. So a couple of these I missed. So what I've done is I've just gone through and forced the level down a little bit. And I'm setting the maximum level lower, and that is hopefully gonna keep me where I need to be in terms of land values. With realistic population, it's really difficult to keep that land value super, super high. And I don't even know that I want to do what's gonna be necessary to make the game that happy. So we're gonna just adjust a few things here and there like this. The other thing, let's just look and make sure that these are straight. There we go. So this to me has a lot more character and looks a ton better. It blends in with the environment more, and then as you get closer to some of the offices and some of the cultural amenities, that's when you would start to see the density start to taper up. And so I want to do a few things there with that. What we'll do is we will look at our RICO. I want to only look at our high density, and we can have a couple of condos and mid-rises. We just used some of these, and we can even modify our blocks to fit within the context of these buildings. Now this is kind of a prime example of why I think this is such a good move, targeting and focusing our density. So here, what we've done now is created a block that basically conforms to the shape of our roadway network. And that is all because we've paid attention. So the one unfortunate thing is it's spilling over just a little bit onto this sidewalk. I'm gonna try to pull this as far forward as I can, and then we'll hide the rest of this with just a little bit of landscaping. It's not terrible, but it's still not perfect. And that does disturb me a little bit. What's really disturbing is I've also left on anarchy. So we have some trees popping up through here as well. So all the sorts of things that you want to pay attention to that, of course, I am excellent about forgetting. So let's go ahead and add a bit of landscaping here and just show you how this is going to bring this to life. So now we've created a place. So when you look here, it makes a lot more sense. I did bump this road out just a little bit, and it to me just feels so much better. So this is something that I will admit to, and I think most planners will admit this to you if you ask them. Planners have a tendency to really love downtown urban areas, and we have a tendency of maybe thinking about them more than anyone else. I started feeling myself losing that. And now I'm probably overcorrecting. This is a ton of fun for me, so I hope that you're okay with me correcting a little bit for this. And what we're seeing here is just an absolutely splendid place, a place that people would probably fight to live in, values that would make sense. So I do have to go through and just force downgrade some of these so that we don't start abandonment. We got apartments here, townhomes. These are attractive places to live. The buildings are not overpowering and overwhelming. Our Capitol buildings and our state buildings. What we're doing now is creating a high density environment that makes sense. We don't have single family homes lining the streets here, but we don't have residential buildings that are just towering over everything else. So this is going to take a lot. We're going to need to really focus on this. And what I want to know is in the comments, let me know if you want to see me do all of this stuff in episodes and streams or off camera, because I'm going to go through and attempt to clean up the entire city. This is, to me, the most important city in the region. And I went back to Fairchild and I went back to Ashland and realized just how much attention and care went into every single street, every single thought and decision that was made in those communities. And I don't know that that same amount of attention has been given here, and I regret it, and I'm going to fix it. So I just want to know how I should go about fixing that. What is going to be the most appropriate thing in your mind, what you actually want to see, because I'm here for it either way. So let me know down in the comments. I'm going to finish up just a couple of more things too. Here's where you can get creative when you're plopping buildings and just combine some things, make your own new building. Sometimes it looks good, sometimes it doesn't. This is one of those instances where maybe if you don't look too close, it's fine. So we're going to copy it and then Alt to spin it around and combine and make this fit the whole block. Yeah, that is what I was looking for. Because now we can go around and add in a little bit of landscaping ourselves and make this really feel like a place that pops. Okay, and we've done a lot today. It's been all over the place, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take inventory of what we've done and have a brief city tour. All right, we're back from our tour, and I think this is the best demonstration of why we have lowered our heights on all of our buildings. So it was a huge mulligan, but now you can see the most prominent buildings in our skyline are all government buildings. That's what the city is. It is a government center. So to have those buildings pop and have them dominate the skyline, that is the goal. And over here, it's kind of the similar situation. These buildings certainly have an impact on the skyline, but they're not hiding the water from everyone who can't afford to live on the shore. And that's the goal here. Open up views for other people. Now, there is a school of thought that maybe you want to have a whole bunch of high density buildings. This is kind of the Chicago school of thought. Maximize those views for as many people as possible, have that density right along the waterfront. And I agree with that to a certain extent as well. I mean, I think that Chicago has a beautiful waterfront. That's just not what we're doing here. We're going to try to ensure that we have public views as much as possible of the water, or that at the very minimum, we're not completely towering over everywhere else, casting massive shadows and hiding the water from everybody. Now we at least have some opportunities to see it from other places because the height is not quite as high. You can also see some of these key buildings now from over here. If you were over here now, because we don't have this massive wall of buildings, you can see the Capitol building again, which I think is really important. I think that is very important. And that is probably my bias as someone who is in Madison, where we have done that. So we have done it here as well. Now let's look at our population. We've lost approximately 5,000. I don't think that's the end of the world. I think in general, we're doing just fine. The city's moving in the right direction. And I'm quite pleased. We have connectivity, we have appropriate building scale and massing, and we are moving in a place where I think we can start to really hone in on the neighborhoods within Van Buren. So that's likely where we're going to go, particularly if you want to see more of this on camera, so please let me know. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit the like button. If you are not subscribed, please consider doing so. And I really cannot wait to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.